Welcome back. So, Summer Claude, right? Honestly, from what I've been seeing online, he seems to be one of the most hyped up units on the banner. And I think a lot of that has to do with his demote status, which is pretty understandable considering what he comes with. He comes with Fallen Star, he has a player phase Brave weapon with Slang, he has Kanto, yada yada yada. And you know, that alongside the rest of the banner, which is already really good. I think it brings up the question as to whether or not this is probably going to be the biggest bait banner of all time, and specifically whether or not Claude is probably one of the biggest bait units that we've gotten in recent history. I know that may be a bit weird to say considering he's a demote on a seasonal banner, which means he's going to be easier to get, but I have my reasons. And I'll be going into those in a bit. However, I should preface this by saying, if you want Claude, this isn't a means of deterring you from getting him, because even with what I'm about to say about him, he's still a really good demote unit. And at the end of the day, going for favorite is what makes this game enjoyable in my opinion. Going for meta all the time may just run you down eventually, unless you are into the meta type of stuff, which I'm a mix of that. I like to do meta and I like to have fun with what I do. But what I'm trying to say is that just go for him if you really like him. Don't worry about what other people have to say, whether they're hyping him up or they're crapping on him or whatever the case may be. If you like Claude, go for Claude. That's what's most important. However, I just want to give my thoughts because I think I'm probably the only person not in the honeymoon phase with Summer Claude. And again, that's not to say he's bad by any means, but I do have issues with him overall, which is why I want to discuss. So, we may as well just get started with Summer Claude. Summer Claude has a really compelling base kit on the surface level. He has a Slaying Player Phase Brave weapon that has built-in Remaining Kanto, and he comes with Fallen Star. And on the surface, looking at that, it looks extremely busted for a demote. And I can understand why. You know, Fallen Star with a Player Phase Brave weapon is really good. However, I want to break this down one by one. Slaying Player Phase Brave with Remaining Kanto for Summer Claude is really good on paper. He has a really good ability to trigger low cooldown specials such as Glimmer because he has Slang and Player Phase Brave, meaning that he'll always get 2 attacks going at minimum. And if he doesn't extend all his movement, he could always just retreat, which is the benefit to having Remaining Kanto. Having Brave means he doesn't really have to worry about running no follow-up if the goal is just to get 2 attacks out at minimum because again, he'll be attacking twice no matter what. And the Slang does provide an extra dose of damage output because he will always be able to trigger a 2 cooldown special no matter what, as long as there aren't any guard effects. And that on its own seems really good. However, I find that him being a flyer is what holds him back and is partially why the reason he's a demote. Because he's a flyer, he can't really run stuff like Time Pulse or Flashing Blade, making skills such as Lethality harder to trigger. Like I mentioned earlier, he can run low cooldown special, so if the idea is just to get that off immediately in a combat, that's not going to be a problem. I think the bigger problem mainly stems from the idea that if he wants to go up against stuff that has damage reduction, then it's probably going to be way too difficult for him to do that, because even if he were to run Lethality, it would start out as a 3 cooldown special, meaning that he would either have to quad, which may not be possible in a lot of cases, or he would have to run Heavy Blade with Quick and Pulse, or he would have to run external support that provides accelerated cooldown so he could charge it even faster. The other problem I find is mainly going to come from the fact that he can't run Flashing Blade, and that is a big point of contention comparatively to Time Pulse, because making Heavy Blade checks nowadays is going to be really difficult, especially on mounted ranged units. You can always run an attack range to make it easier, for example, or you can run an attack defense menace. I know we don't have the stats at the time of this video, however, there's a good chance it's not really going to be exceeding a huge amount. It will probably be really good, but I would say compared to other units that can hit even higher levels of attack, especially from ones that are melee oriented, because those happen to be 16 might at base, depending on the foe, I find that Heavy Blade checks just won't be reliable nowadays. Especially, again, since a lot of units are hitting higher and higher levels of attack. You can provide external support if you want to make it easier. However, I don't find it to be all that reliable in many cases. Still, that doesn't mean he can't do it. It's just not going to be consistent enough comparatively to Flashing Blade. Of course, there's also the point of contention with his condition, which just relies on visible buffs or debuffs on the foe, which to be fair is going to be pretty easy, because just running visible buffs on himself will just make it go off like that. However, you do always have to watch out for stuff that can cancel it out, such as Distant Defense 4, Slick Fighter, Armors, which is always something he may have to watch out for, because Far Save tends to be more potent than Near Save. And of course, the final part of his weapon, the Remaining Kanto. Personally, I find that remaining Canto is just never really as good as either fixed Canto or remaining Canto +1 because they will always have extra movement to go off no matter what. That being said, at least with ranged calves, they have more flexibility since they have 3 movement. But my problem mainly stems from the fact that ranged flyers only have 2 movement, meaning that more often than not, they're going to be extending all their movement in one turn. So remaining Canto is never really going to go off. Of course, you can smite them in, which may remedy it a bit, but I do find that it's a bit more finicky, especially for hit and run strategies. You could also buff his movement with units such as Astrid, who can grant extra movement, which is really nice. But that also comes at the cost of a team slot, which is still fine if you really want to do it. There's no knocking it there. But outside of that, his weapon's still really good, all things considered, especially for a demote, so I'm not really going to knock it there. And then we get to Fallen Star, which I think is the one thing everybody grabbed to because Fallen Star is notorious for being really, really good. You know, it provides damage reduction. If he initiates combat, he gets 80% damage reduction, which is really good. It also provides an ability to allow him to eat a hit in the enemy phase if he really needs to do that. Plus, the benefit with Fallen Star is that it can inflict gravity on the foes he targets and adjacent foes next to the targeted foes, so he can always attempt hit and run strategies. That being said, I find that Fallen Star is the biggest bait when it comes to Summer Claude overall, because in my opinion, I find that the reason Fallen Star was as good as it was because it was paired with no follow-up, since the only way you could counter it is with natural speed. I did mention earlier that lacking no follow-up wasn't exactly the biggest issue when it came to just securing attacks, which I do still stand by. However, lacking no follow-up in this case does also have its issues because it doesn't prevent any sort of doubles from the enemy, meaning that even if he were to eat the first hit, if the foe is able to double, which is going to happen because he lacks any sort of no follow-up, then he'll still be taking 100% damage on the second hit, which is a problem. Of course, this can be remedied with an impact skill, which isn't the worst thing by any means. Of course, that also comes at an opportunity cost. If you're trading out a skill that grants attack and speed for impact, he's going to be more prone to natural doubles. And if the targeted unit he goes up against does have no follow-up and high speed, then he'll still be doubled anyway. And that's personally why I don't think Fallen Star is as crazy as it may seem for a demote. However, considering the state of ranged flyer B slots, it's not exactly the worst thing considering that there isn't really many other options, so I don't really want this to seem like I'm shitting on Fallen Star. I'm just trying to give it another perspective. But outside of his base kit, the other benefit that he has is his BST. Now, ranged flyers don't really have the best BST, obviously, but with a dual skill in Fallen Star, he can actually score 185 BST, which, while isn't anything new, is still really, really good to have on a more offensive unit. So you're not running something like Balthus with distant counter and attempting to speed stack him. You just have a much more potent offensive unit with built-in Canto. Even with my issues with remaining Canto aside, it's still a nice perk to have. That being said, Arena is mainly dependent on legendaries anyway, so if you were to take Arena seriously, then you're going to need more than just the 185 BST, which is still nice, but that alone's not going to do enough, especially if you want to score high in Arena, which I don't recommend doing anyway because you don't really get much out of it. Unless you really like Arena and you want those crowns, go for it. And it does help that he is a demote, so it is easier to get merges for him. However, I also would say that adds a bit to the bait because that means he is more tempting to pull. But to be honest, that's the least of the issues in my opinion. Having him that easily mergeable is a really nice benefit. But outside of that, he's still a really good unit. I don't want anybody leaving this video thinking that I don't think he's good, because he is good. In fact, I'm probably pulling for him anyway. I like him. I want some Claudes. I don't think he's a bad unit at all. And I would say that out of all the demotes that we have in the pool, he's probably one of the best ones that we have, simply because of what he comes with. However, I just wanted to put my thoughts out there no matter how hot they may seem. Again, if you really like Claude, go for him. There's a lot of benefits to him. That shouldn't discourage you. This should not discourage you. However, you'll have to let me know down below if I'm just being too harsh. Honestly, for all I know, I could just be entirely wrong. But, again, these are just my thoughts. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really have a closer, so bye!